Welcome back to the Matchbook NFL Podcast. Week 3 is in the books. Not an exceptionally good week for the podcast, but it's only week 3, guys. Let's not panic. And we're delighted to be joined. If you're watching us now live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you can see the guy in the bottom right of the screen. He's not one of our regular guys, but he's going forward. Mr. Rob Pizzola. Rob, welcome, mate. Obviously, look, Rob, the betting sphere in the US, especially on Twitter, will know you well. But maybe for the UK followers and viewers, tell us a small bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I bet on sports for a living. I have for several years now. People in North America might have known me in Canada as a radio and TV personality. And then at some point, I just realized I think I have an edge on sports. And that started with daily fantasy, which I did well on for a long time. And then I said, you know what, my edge is kind of drying up here. Let me see if I can apply these models to more traditional sports betting markets. And that worked out. So I'm mainly a North American sports bettor, focusing on football, and I'm Canadian, so a lot of hockey as well. But yeah, that's my thing.
Robert, delighted to have you on board. You're going to be doing alternate weeks with Sumas, so he'll be back next week and you'll be back the weekend after that. Guys, I just want to get into week 3 takeaways. And Rob, I'm going to stay with you for a second. There are 14 games currently on the board at Matchbook. There's 2 games, obviously COVID-related, that aren't on the board. 7 of these games, obviously half, 50%, are in the 50s and mid-50s for the totals. It's been crazy. Have you ever seen a week like that in NFL history the past couple of years?
I can't remember it in the NFL. I've seen things like this in other sports before, where there's changes at the start of the year that the market is slow to catch up on, and you end up seeing either a lot of overs or a lot of unders, and then probably about 3 or 4 weeks into the season, things start to correct. We're starting to see that now, but scoring is up over 5 points per game this year. I did a deep dive into penalties yesterday and looked at accepted penalties particularly, and there are way less offensive holding penalties this year versus last year. A lot of people will be contributing that to the lack of crowd noise and the lack of fans. I kind of did a breakdown personally on the side on special teams versus non-special teams. I don't think it's the fans that are making the impact personally. I just think it's the way that the game is being called. And that's what I've seen. I don't know if it's a mandate by the NFL to have higher scoring games, better the on-field product. I'm going to guess that's what it is. Maybe the lack of fans contributes into some sort of referee bias where they don't feel the need to flag as much. That could be something. But definitely we're seeing less offensive holding penalties. That contributes to more scoring. On the defensive side of things, it seems like they're not really calling defensive holding anymore, and they're turning those into defensive pass interference penalties a lot as well. So instead of the 5 yards, you're getting bigger, larger gains for the offense, because potentially instead of a 5-yard penalty, it's a 40-yard penalty on the defense and things like that. But it's not all there. It's not entirely penalties. Teams are playing faster. There's a number of factors that contribute. But I personally think this is the new NFL until I see differently. I think the NFL likes this product. As a fan, personally, I like this product. So it's been really hard to handicap totals for me particularly. And I think going forwards, I'm kind of like throwing out priors from previous years because I think this is just what it is now.
It's a blank slate. Drew Dinsick, you're nodding your head. Get stuck in. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Welcome to the juice ball era in the NFL. I mean, this is in the same way that Rob, pointed out. Leagues do this from time to time. The NBA did this a couple of years ago, where they changed the rule on shot clock on an offensive rebound, and you had an absolute explosion in scoring. They clearly have de-emphasized holding and offensive holding specifically, and it makes for a much better product. Honestly, like watching Week 1, I felt like, wow, the games haven't had this kind of flow and this kind of rhythm in a long time. This is nice. Couldn't put my finger on what it was that was going on. It was just that we weren't seeing as many of the refs. And, and then a couple of the games where you kind of got the old school guys who are still interested in calling holding from time to time, and you notice it now. Like, it's like, oh, come on. Like, that was ticky-tack. What the heck is going on? Why are they influencing, who they got a side here? So it's pretty clear, at least, that there's been an emphasis from top down to change the way the referees are calling the game. It's made it more enjoyable. And, to your question of, is this going to continue? I don't see any reason it's going to slow down at this point. Eventually we're going to get into cooler weather. Eventually you're going to have wind influencing totals. Eventually you could have, we've had pretty unlucky injuries across the fantasy sports landscape because you had all these injuries to skill position players. But we have had pretty healthy quarterbacks to this point. All the top 20 quarterbacks in the league are all still out there, and so you still have pretty competent offensive output overall. Only thing I can add in terms of what difference the fans might make, it does feel like tackling is off to a degree. There could be some reduction in aggression among the defensive players just because they're not getting fired up by the home fans, but that's pretty speculative. And I think realistically, this is 90% penalties.
Adam Chernoff, I know in your past you worked as a line maker in South America, but I mean, I think it's one of those times you don't want to be a line maker because this is very hard from an odds compiling perspective to adjust. And how far do you adjust? You don't want to go too far because you're just going to hit on the other side of it. But what are you making? What the guys said there regards even these totals going forward?
Well, I'll tell you what, they did a pretty good job adjusting some of these numbers. Like I was waiting on Houston, Minnesota, and I thought like maybe we sneak like a 48-49, and they opened it up at like 53.5. So there's been a lot of adjustments like made really quickly, and I think they've been done well. Only thing I can really add to what the guy said, like I was looking back last year, weeks 1 to 3, there were 17 teams with an EPA per play greater than 0. This year there's 24. So like that's pretty significant. But in just sort of speculative, what have I been seeing? There's been some quarterbacks talking about how their cadence at the line of scrimmage has been much easier to hear and much easier to manage. And so I wonder how much that is playing a part. If all the offensive linemen can hear every single thing that's going on, all the receivers know some of these hard counts, and they sort of have that extra jump that tends to be negated when there's a lot of noise. And even if you're the offensive team at home, like there's still noise that you have to battle through. So if there's that extra half second of a jump off the line where these guys could hear it much clearer, that could also be sort of contributing to the offensive success we're seeing at least early in the season. But comparing to 2011, where there was sort of that similar disrupted offseason, scoring was way up in the first 3 weeks, and then it started to get adjusted relative to the totals going on week 4 and onward. So this week will be interested to see if there's any sort of adjustment or comeback in scoring. But certainly so far, I think books are doing a good job at adjusting these numbers up because, I mean, you can look at almost any total that's been played so far. You can ask the question, like, what would you make this line again if the two teams played? Yeah. And it's always leaning to that over. So interesting so far to see through the first 3 weeks.
Absolutely interesting times ahead. All right, gentlemen, let's jump into week 4's action. We're going to start the middle of Sunday night. Patriots against the Chiefs. Chiefs laying 7 at the moment. Their matchbook, and 52.5 is the total. Drew Dinsick, I'll start with you first. Rob Pizzola tweeted about it's probably going to be the last time for a long time that we're going to be backing Patrick Mahomes as an underdog last Monday night. But what did you take away from Monday night? Because we were very divided. I know you were going to hang on for 4.5 on the Chiefs. I don't think it came, but they were exceptionally impressive on Monday night.
Oh, without question. And Rob is right. That may be the last time until he's in his older age that you really get a chance to swing away on Mahomes as a dog more than 3 points. It was wild to see it. I know why there were people that were high on the Ravens. Like if you use kind of a data-driven model, you're going to take last year's Ravens as your prior. You're going to say, well, they didn't change any of these parts other than, a guard retired and, they let an old safety go, but they brought in some new pieces. So I'm going to stick with the last year's prior. And then they exceeded expectations through 2 weeks. So it was entirely reasonable that kind of the data-driven folks kind of had an outrageously high rating on the Ravens, and they were pushing that number, really keeping it in place at 3.5, 3. But for sure, the Ravens are not a good matchup for the Chiefs. We know that. We've seen it actually. Last year we saw it. Last year the Ravens had a lucky cover. And the Chiefs, they have a very specific way that they can make you hurt. We've seen it so many times now. It's surprising that there's not a little bit more consensus across the league in terms of what you need to do to stop this, and that a guy with as much experience as John Harbaugh and Wink didn't have a better plan for how to contain Mahomes. But if you blitz him, if you give him the opportunity to break the pocket, if you let him get outside, and he's going to swing away and hit home runs on you, and it's going to hurt. And it's realistically 34 points. They left points on the field. With the Kansas City Chiefs, they could have scored in the 40s. And so it's interesting to look at this matchup where you have, a guy like Bill Belichick, who in my opinion, at least has kind of the only guy that I've really seen put together a decent blueprint on how you limit Mahomes, and he did it in the AFC title game 2 years ago. And it's basically you keep him off the field as much as possible, and when he is on the field, you contain him. You know, instead of kind of trying to get interior pressure, instead of blitzing and strong siding him or weak siding him, you just try to literally contain him in the pocket, make him go through his progressions, and you match up their speed at the skill position players with speed in your defensive backfield. And the Patriots have that. So to some degree, I think Belichick can give us a much better look defensively against Mahomes and this Chiefs offense than what we saw against the Ravens. On top of the Ravens the top of the Chiefs coming in on a short week is going to be a difficult turnaround for them. And the Patriots likely on offense go with plan A, as we are going to run it down your throat. A plan that looked to be working against the Chiefs, and the Ravens, for some bizarre reason, got away from it. I would expect the Patriots are competitive in this one. I was hoping to get a 7.5. It still may manifest. I haven't played this game yet, but I'm hoping that kind of the recreational players come into this market and push it up to 7.5 come Sunday, because I'd like to be a Patriots backer at 7.5.
Yeah, of course, you can get plenty of 7.5 in Matchbook. It depends how much you want to buy for that half a point, but we'll come back to that in a second. Adam Chernoff, you're very bullish on the Ravens prior to the season, prior to week one's recording especially. What are your thoughts? What was your takeaway from Monday night regards to Ravens? We'll get to the Chiefs in a second, but I was just kind of interested in the Ravens in that spot and what your thoughts were.
I think it's the worst game we've ever seen Harbaugh coach in his career as the Ravens. Like, there was some wild decision making, especially early with that field goal, but then beyond that, throughout the game, the willingness to abandon what was working, it was weird. And the Ravens looked, I don't know if it was like hesitant or afraid to make a mistake or what it was, but it was just very strange to see them in that spot. Usually a team that's so well run and so well coached that just dropped the ball. And that opening drive field goal was just baffling to me. But it was as bad as I've seen Harbaugh call a game, and as bad as I've seen Wink fail to adjust on defense. So that was weird for the Ravens to see. But in terms of this game, Kansas City defensively has enormous issues, and they were very well masked in that game against Baltimore, which I didn't expect to be the case. Thankfully, I didn't bet either side, because I obviously probably would have gone Baltimore. So I dodged the bullet there. Breeland's still going to be out for this game. He hasn't played yet this season because he's been suspended. But L'Jarius Sneed has been performing really well. Now he's got a shoulder injury, so we don't know what his status is going to be. So there's going to be potentially a spot where the secondary is banged up. Chris Jones has been huge on the defensive line. He's got the tweak grind, so we don't know necessarily what his status is going to be. To date, the Chiefs have missed more tackles than any other team in the league, not named the Raiders or the Jets, through 3 weeks. So there's big issues with Kansas City, especially when it comes to stopping the run. New England and this new offense, when it comes to holding the ball, like, they're extremely good at what they do. And I think that still the game planning against this, because it's so new and there's so little tape on it, is very hard to defend. And the thing that I've found interesting when looking into this game, there's this idea, I think, in whether it's like we see this running offense in New England, then like they get behind, can they do anything? They're actually in 105 snaps where they've been trailing this season. Success rate running the football 61%, passing a league average of 47%. So it hasn't been a case where New England has got behind and they've just become wildly inefficient just because of how this offense is structured. They can still definitely play from behind. So I think that this, from just a schematic perspective, there's a lot that can go right for New England in this spot. Where my biggest question is, and I don't think it's being realized by the market yet, is this Patriots defense. A ton of guys opted out from last year in a season where the defense relative to the schedule they faced was probably inflated in terms of their numbers. Through 3 weeks this season, and this might be surprising to people listening, the Patriots are 32nd in defensive success rate. That's dead last in the NFL. Wow. No team has allowed more success down to down than the New England Patriots. Now, albeit EPA tends to be more predictive than success rate, and they're right around average in those three categories. But now they're going to have to come up with a game plan to defend Kansas City. We saw how much better KC looks, or how much more open this defense looks, or this offense looks, when facing man coverage and defense first 2 weeks against the Chargers and the Texans. There's 2 and 3 deep safety looks the entire time. KC is still very efficient. But now they're going to get New England, who's much more of a man coverage team. Are they going to switch? How are they going to adjust to that? And still, there's just so many guys that have departed from this team. We've seen the holes in this Patriots defense through the first 3 weeks. Now it's a huge step up in class, even more so, I think, from Seattle, who was they hung 35 without a problem. So now becomes a question of just how many points can KC score and what is New England going to do to keep up from a game plan. So no bet for me on this one yet, as it's sitting on the 7, but let's see where it comes off the key number if it does.
Rob, what are you thinking with this one? Obviously, like Adam said there, it's sitting on the 7. It went to the 7.5. Could you be tempted with the Patriots there? But Adam did make some pretty good salient points regarding that defense. There's a lot of question marks there.
Yeah, for sure. I would be tempted with the Patriots at 7.5. I'm not necessarily sure I would play it. I kind of, like, as oddly as it sounds, made a promise to myself a long time ago after betting against Mahomes quite a bit early on in his career that I'm not really going to rush to do this unless I feel like I'm getting an egregious amount of points. And honestly, 7.5 with all the points that Adam made about the New England defense, it's not an egregious amount of points. Like, they can have success against Mahomes and he could still put up 35 just like Seattle did a couple of weeks ago. I do love Bill Belichick. I think he's such a smart coach. I mean, you look at last week against Las Vegas and they were double teaming the check down option for the Raiders. You would never ever see a team do that. And like, you watch teams play the Saints and they just keep dumping it off to Kamara in open space, and you're wondering, like, why don't they just put another guy on him? And like, no teams do that. But Derek Carr's such a check down quarterback and doesn't throw the ball deep that Bill's like, okay, we're just going to take away his favorite option and make him beat us, and he couldn't do it. So I do think that there will be a good game plan in place from the Patriots, way better than you saw from the Ravens, who, like, we all know you can't blitz Mahomes on like 50% of his dropbacks. You're going to lose. And they just kept doing it over and over. And it's like, it's the definition of insanity, right? Like, just repeating the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And it wasn't happening. I don't expect the Patriots to do that, but Patriots put in a sound effort and a sound defensive game. I still think KC scores into the 30s here. So 7.5, I will be tempted. I might potentially fire a half bet into that, but it's not going to be something that I love this week. I think regardless of where this number goes.
Yeah, backing against Mahomes is not such a visible thing right now. Guys, quickly before we move off this one, anyone got any thoughts on this total? It opened provisionally at 54. It's been bet down 1.5 to 52.5. Anyone see anything why the total could be backing under? Drew, any thoughts?
If I'm taking the total, I'm probably going to isolate just Patriots team total over, because I like – and it's mostly because I'm concerned about the Chiefs' defensive injuries, and 2 weeks ago I would have been like, Patriots down 2 scores, I want nothing to do with them. Like, I don't believe in Cam Newton being able to throw his way back into a game. But obviously the Seattle game, and granted that was a very, very soft defense, that proved that he still has something in terms of his ability to throw the ball downfield. So I've completely adjusted my opinion on that, and I think the Patriots can go score for score here. And I get that. I agree that median expectation here is the Chiefs get into the 30s, but Belichick has really schemed well against them. Not defensively keeping them off the scoreboard, but just playing them close through the years. And the amount of weapons that he has in his defensive backfield, speed. Guys like this might be Kyle Dugar's coming out party. That he might have something specifically drawn up. He's been training this guy for 4 weeks. Like, we're going to unleash you against Mahomes, and you're going to have a 3-pick performance or something. Like, there's going to be some wrinkles that you're not expecting from the Belichick defense here. And realistically, the success rate point that Adam brought up, it sounds like you're making a case that there's going to be regression to the mean from a success rate standpoint here, that they're going to come back to average, and it all could be in this game. So I'm kind of talking myself into the Patriots here at +7. I think that's the right way to attack this.
All right, Patriots +7 for Drew. We will come back to later in the show and see if we lock that in as official play. Right, let's move on to the Bills against the Raiders. Raiders getting 3 currently at the time of recording. 52 is the total. Rob, let's start with you here first on the Bills. They were well fancy last week on this podcast as well. They made us swing through it, that we were sweating. we were buckling under the pressure, especially in the third quarter where they just went to sleep and left the Rams in. What are you thinking in this one? Plenty of 2.5 around as well, looking at it, but it seems to be settling on 3 right now. Are you on the Bills or the Raiders in this one?
I like the Bills quite a bit. I think they match up really well with the Raiders. And listen, I'm not anointing Josh Allen an MVP, as a lot of people are at this point in the year. I'm still waiting for that game where we get the true Josh Allen experience, because it's going to happen. But I don't think it's happening this week. I really don't. I think the Bills' offense especially has matchup advantages all over the field. You look at the Raiders, I mean, whatever you think of PFF grades, I look at them regularly. It's something I like to incorporate into my handicapping. You look at their secondary, they don't have a single player in their secondary that's ranking at better than 53rd at their position this season. I mean, the secondary has been absolutely horrible. Their linebacking core takes a hit this week. I mean, you look at their defense and generating pressure on the quarterback, 3.2% adjusted sack rate this year, second lowest number in the league. They just don't do anything well on defense. So I think the Bills have a lot of matchups that they can exploit. And I do think Buffalo is going to score points. And I love the job that Brian Daboll's done as OC there. And he's putting Allen in pretty good positions right now. Stephon Diggs coming over, I didn't think it was going to have as much of an impact as it does, because Allen's such an inaccurate downfield passer. But they're just putting him in a position to succeed. I think that's a lot of why he's finding success so far this year. And then I look on the other side of the ball, and if Vegas can't get back Trent Brown this week, that's a bad offensive line. I mean, they lose Richie Incognito for the year, which is a pretty massive gap to fill already. You look at that Buffalo defensive line, I think that's a pretty bad matchup for them. Buffalo got a couple of linebackers back last week in Milano and Edwards as well, which I think is going to bolster that defense going forward. So I look at both sides of the ball. I struggle to see where the Raiders really have an advantage at all. And on top of that, I mean, 3 points, it just seems really short to me personally. I made this game not higher than 3. I do expect it to even come off a field goal with, action this morning is looking that way. My only concern, and this is my only concern in betting this game, is we saw this with hockey. It's really weird that I'm going to say this, but it's like the Las Vegas hangover type of experience. These teams are going to Vegas. Who knows what they're doing? Maybe they're partying. I think COVID eliminates that a little bit, to be completely honest with you, because it's not as much that you can do. But we did see it, and it was called the Vegas flu in hockey, actually, for the first year that they were in the league, where they had this unreal home record because traveling teams were coming in and they were getting out late at night. That's legitimately my only concern in this game, is something off field, which I can't really incorporate into my numbers. But aside from that, to me, give me Buffalo in this one. I think this is a blowout.
Adam, Rob makes the case there for plenty of mismatches here with the Bills. For the Raiders against the Bills. What are you making of this one? Tough one last week for you too. I think you were on the Rams, and I mean, look, that could have gone another way very easily.
No, I had the over. I think everyone used to listening to the show is used to me losing, especially this season. In the
I didn't say that.
That was one I actually won.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make a case either way here for the sides, but I'll throw something out there. And just quickly before I get going, I'll give Daboll the MVP before I'm giving it to Allen. Like what he's done in the first 3 weeks for these game plans has been terrific. The early down pass rate up 10% versus last season, 9.3 yards per pass for Allen on first and second down. Pass rate overall through the roof, 63% versus 54% last year. He's completely transformed this offense, and he's just put together 3 terrific game plans. Probably going to do the same here. Reason I'm not jumping on this either way. Bills, I think better team, but if we're going to sort of compare them side by side through the first 3 weeks of the season, Raiders have played Carolina, New Orleans, and New England. Bills have played the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Rams. So from a defensive efficiency standpoint, believe it or not, when we hear that, like if you just hear those 3 team names on each side, you would say that the Raiders have played a much more difficult schedule. From a defensive efficiency standpoint, it's equal. They're both played the 4th easiest schedule in the NFL through 3 weeks. Raiders are 3rd in success rate, offensive success rate. Bills are 8th. The Raiders have a bit of an edge up there. But then we see through other numbers here, pretty tight. Raiders 8th in EPA per play. The Bills are 5th. Raiders are 8th in drop back EPA. The Bills are 3rd. The Raiders are 11th in rush EPA. The Bills are 30th. So obviously passing more predictive and better than running the football. We all know that to a significant extent. So that last number a bit skewed, but there's not a huge difference in how these two teams have performed offensively against very similar schedules earlier in the season. I think the case for the Raiders comes if you think that the Saints and the Patriots defense, which have both performed terribly, but if you think there's more value and success against those teams versus what the Bills have done against the Jets and the Dolphins, then that's probably where you're starting to look for the Raiders within this handicap. But for me, both teams are going to find success throwing the football to an extent, and it's really going to come down to who has more success on the ground to give that offense the better edge. These two teams, 31st and 32nd against the run so far through the first 3 weeks. Again, Raiders have a bit of an edge there so far, what we've seen through the first 3 weeks. But it's not a game I'm going to get involved with unless it comes off of the key. As Rob said, I do think it goes to 3.5. Then it starts to look a little bit different, but not a game I'm getting involved in.
True. Drew, you're very bullish on the Bills last week. We got there in the end. What are you thinking this week?
Yeah, man. So the Bills are probably the team that I have changed my opinion on the most in terms of like, what is this team relative to the preseason? I looked at them and I was like, man, they got just an awesome defense. Everybody's back. If they can get anything out of Josh Allen, they're going to be a contender this year. But now I look at them and it's like, whoa. They have a dynamic passing offense. They can't run the ball to save their lives. The defense is performing way below expectation. And you look at a game like last week, 28-3 lead. How do you blow that? Like, you blow it because you can't run the football and put the game away. You can't rush the passer and prevent a comeback. And that scares me if I'm backing the Bills in this spot because, clearly, the one way you make Derek Carr squirm, you get interior pressure on him. And, we saw some flashes from Ed Oliver in week 1 where I was like, this guy's going to be a player this year. Like, he looks good. And then he really hasn't been the same guy since then. And if you can't get interior pressure when, the Raiders are missing incognito, then they're, if they have any kind of adjustments they can make in terms of blocking scheme or anything like that, the Raiders are a little bit live for a comeback here. And for sure, the points Rob brings up about playing in Vegas, especially when you're this 3-0 team that just survived, a close call. You travel across the country, and you're reading your press clippings, and you're the biggest deal in Buffalo, New York. Like, this is not a great spot, from a motivational standpoint. Some of the lackluster performance we saw out of, the Raiders last week, I think was somewhat predictable. They get a enormous Monday night win against the Saints at home, a home opener. They travel across country and they got to play Belichick and the Patriots. Like no surprise they looked like trash. So, it's to a degree, I think these teams are kind of close, kind of similar. The Bills are clearly better and kind of better in all the key areas you want to be better. But I worry about them putting away a lead. And I think if I took anything in this game, it would be an over. I mean, 52 seems like a high number just based on, years and years of handicapping the NFL. You're like 52 Bills, really? The Raiders can go score for score with these guys. If the Raiders can put together, 14-point fourth quarter, this thing's going over the total.
Oh, Sully muted himself. That's never happened.
First time for everything. It used to be Brad Allen last year. Yeah, I'm embarrassed, guys. The actual producer and host of the show muted himself. So anyway, Drew, what I was saying when I was muting myself was this ain't your father's Buffalo Bills. And I think they're, both teams have hit the over in the first 3 weeks. So I think there may be something there. 52 in today's NFL is a very gettable total. So I like both selections there. We'll recap those ones in a bit, of course. Right, let's move on to the Cleveland Browns and the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm going to share my screen for this one. We're going to look at some live odds here at Matchbook. Current betting there, as you can see on screen. At the time of recording, Cleveland Browns in the money line 2.98. Dallas Cowboys are just under 1.46. Browns getting a 4.5 point start at 1.96. 55 is the total, one of the 7 games in the 50s. Adam Chernoff, start with you here. What do you make of the Dallas Cowboys Sunday night? I mean, look, they could have easily won that game, but they just never looked like they would be able to stop Russell Wilson. And what are you thinking here? Laying 4.5, they haven't been good laying points in their last couple of games, even going back into last season.
I'll probably defer the majority of the Cowboys comments to the bottom right of the screen, as I know we have a Cowboys fan joining the video. But I don't know who this team is stopping and when. Like, defensively, They're a mess. And I look at them, EPA, they're better against the pass than only Atlanta, Houston, the Jets, Giants, and Jags. Like, that's not good. And this was a defense that I think a lot of people were projecting to be well above average coming into the season, but obviously injuries have sort of tapered that off a bit. So we'll see what this defensive unit ultimately turns into. But against the Cleveland Browns, who've shown a ton of success on the ground so far through 3 weeks, and Mayfield has looked good at times, I think it's another week where the Cowboys have trouble stopping their opponent. The one thing that's really keeping me away from thinking about potentially getting involved with Cleveland, Denzel Ward left the game last week against Washington. He's been by far and away the only hope that the Browns have of covering anyone on the other side of the football. So if he's limited or can't play, like, that's a huge loss. Greedy Williams came back last week, but he's also banged up. So that's cornerback number 1 and 2. Without those guys facing this Cowboys offense, that's as much trouble as it is potentially the other way, if not significantly more. So not really a game I have too much interest in here. Side, if I had to go total, it's just so many points to lay. But it's just, I think Rob will have much better thoughts here.
All right, Rob, Dallas Cowboys resident fan, take it away. What are you thinking with this one?
Yeah, I mean, piggyback on a lot of things Adam said there. My raw number is a little bit lower here, so I do lean towards the Browns side. The Denzel Ward injury for me is extremely concerning because, I mean, and you talk about trios of receivers in the NFL, it doesn't really get much better than what Dallas is offering up in a trio of receivers there. My concern is very much with the Cowboys offense right now, which I think a lot of people are going to look at the point totals and say, wow, like, this team is humming, right? They're putting up all these points, but so much of that has come in garbage time when they've been trailing. I haven't really been impressed with the game plans. I think the losses left tackle and right tackle this year have really hampered that offense. You add in the retirement of their center in the offseason as well. This is just not the offensive line that it once was. So you look at Myles Garrett. I mean, he's gonna eat in this game pretty much. I don't know. I mean, Tyron Smith might be back, but even then, Olivier Vernon might be back on the other side of the ball as well, which is going to bolster the Browns. I just don't know how you could lay the number with Dallas based off what you've seen so far. I'm not in love with Cleveland either. Believe me, I was probably higher on the Browns going into the year and downgraded them a little bit as well. I'm not impressed with the early down play calling for them specifically, where they're running the ball a ton on early downs. But I look at the weapons that they offer. If they do get into passing situations, like, I'm just really struggling to see how the Cowboys generate stops overall. It's a team that's really depleted. I mean, offensive line problems, missing 2 of their top 3 linebackers, missing 2 of their top 3 cornerbacks. Seems like Cleveland could pretty much score at will if they want to, if they come in with a good game plan here. So to me, Browns or nothing. But the Browns are a team that, like, they don't really inspire much confidence either. They could easily get this wrong, and they have been getting it wrong for many years as well. And honestly, like, I thought, turnover in coaching staff, things will be a little bit different this year. I really haven't been impressed, to be completely honest, with Cleveland's coaching staff so far this year. Definitely an upgrade from what they've had in years past, but
that's not saying much, right?
That's exactly where I was going. So, and like, just one more, like, Baker, right? I'm not a Baker Mayfield guy. I'm not. I don't see enough consistency from him. Like, they could come out this week and he could be completely awful, and it's not surprising anyone anymore. So it's just really tough game for me to get involved with. I definitely cannot lay the points with Dallas. Totally see the arguments for the Browns here, and if I had to play the game, it would be Browns, but I likely won't be.
You don't have to play it, obviously. But Drew, I think you played the Browns already. Yes or no?
Yeah, I took the Browns off the opener at 5. I would still back them at 4.5. I make this a coin flip game, and it boils down to a lot of the points that Rob just made, which is, clearly the best, the most talented unit on the field out of these 4 is the Dallas Cowboys offense. The trio of wide receivers is great. Dak Prescott is amazing. But, you saw last week the limitations with their, the Seattle has no pass rush, nothing. And they still made an impact in that game in, huge, high leverage plays that they came up with, creating turnovers and, putting pressure on Dak. I can entirely see, the Browns being able to manifest stops in that same way. Huge game, drive changing, sacks, drive changing fumbles. And color me completely unimpressed with the Kellen Moore experience this season. It's, the first 3 games that he had last year relative to, whatever Jason Garrett did to him in terms of tutelage, he ruined him. And it may all turn around. But these swing dump offs to Zeke, just wasted downs, and it's just like you have all of these guys who can get absolutely wide open down the field. You have a couple of schemes that you put them on tape, and it's like this is unstoppable. And they just don't do it enough. And they could get there, entirely possible that, come midseason, we're like, have you ever seen an offense as good as these Cowboys once their offensive line is healthy? But they're going to have to win games scoring 40 points. That's all there is to say, because this defense is talent poor. They're injury riddled. And, I backed the Rams week 1 on the money line in large part because I thought second half lead, the Rams, with their dynamic rushing attack against this Cowboys defense, they're going to be able to play keep away. And I see the same thing here with the Browns. If the Browns have a lead in the fourth quarter, I think the Browns put away this win.
With the Cowboys. Sorry, Rob.
I will say there's only I was on the Browns against Washington last week, and I watched a lot of that game because I was invested there. And honestly, the Browns offense, it's concerning. And you look at the final score in that game, you're going to see 34-20. You're going to say, "Oh, this is a blowout." But I mean, they generated 5 turnovers on defense last week. They won the turnover margin by 5. They had 3 touchdown drives that were 35 yards or less. Their yards per play on offense is 4.8 last week against Washington. And that's not to say that Washington has a bad defense, but it's an average defense, in my opinion. Really good defensive line. Outside of that, you look back to the week before, they did move the ball on the Bengals. So, I mean, it's been a little bit Jekyll and Hyde for sure. But it's such a struggle for me with Cleveland because you look at the talent, right, and what they have there. And there's so many weapons, but maybe it's recency bias for me last weekend, and potentially I'm missing out on a play here. But I was thoroughly unimpressed with the offense last week and moving the ball against Washington. To me, you generate 5 turnovers in a game against Washington, that should be a 28-point win, and it was close.
Yeah. All right, they're Browns 0-7 in their last 7 road games and haven't covered either. So I don't know, Joe. I kind of I kind of see why you played the 5 there, but it's I don't know. It's a tough one. It could be very much.
It's a tough week. It's a tough week, so you got to take the little edges where you get them, and it's
a brutal week. I thought last week was tough, but I think this week is just as tough.
The one last point I'll make is there is a slight disconnect between how poor the Dallas Cowboys defense is and what you're seeing with the numbers, in my opinion. And so to some degree, the guys who are out there shaping markets based on, data and analysis, I think are a little behind on the Cowboys and, what they, and how it manifests in a game state here. If this is back and forth scoring through 3 quarters and, this becomes team with the ball last wins, I tip my hat. I tip it just in favor of the Browns because their offensive line is a little more cohesive. Their running attack is at least, has teeth. So it's a soft lane for the Browns, but there's not a lot to like on this week's card.
It's a lean nonetheless. You got to play something as well just to keep it going. But look, I mean, the Cowboys could easily go 1-3 here and probably still win that division anyway. It's just so bad.
That is a fair point.
They should be 0-3 is the reality.
Yeah, absolutely. But Atlanta, Yeah. Like I said, look, if they need to win the division 7-9, who cares? It's like into the playoffs. Right, let's move on. Colts and Bears. Current betting and match, both Colts are just under 1.7 for the Bears at home in Soldier Field. They came back at 2.26. 2.5. Seems to be going with the Bears, actually. There's a lot of 3 around early in the week. So the Bears getting a 2.5 point start. 45 is the total. Rob, stick with you here first, because I think there's differing views between Adam and Drew on this one. So early doors here. Is anything you like here? Colts laying 2.5. Would you be comfortable enough with that right now?
I'm not. So if I'm picking a side, it's going to be the Colts here. First, we can talk about the quarterbacks because that's obviously going to be the big thing this week is Nick Foles in at quarterback. And a lot of people saying that it's a lateral move. They're not convinced Foles is an upgrade. I disagree with that. I do think Foles is a bit of an upgrade. That's not to say I think Nick Foles is good because he's not. He's bad. He's a bad quarterback. But I think Trubisky is so bad that this is an upgrade for them. And I'm not really putting much stock into the last week against Atlanta. I mean, I was on the Falcons last week. I was on the Lions week 1 against the Bears and the Falcons week 3 against the Bears. And I don't come back. So I've seen a lot of it. I saw Foles throw a lot of near interceptions last week. Like, we're talking right through defenders' hands and things of that. There was a lot of luck involved in that. And I'm just not really sold on the Chicago Bears. Now, with that said, the challenge for me is I think we're going to see some regression from Indy as well. Like, they're a 3-0 team. Sorry, not a 3-0 team, but they're a good football team. But they play the Jaguars, the Vikings, and the Jets, right? I mean, those are horrible football teams. But most importantly, those are teams where they dominate the line of scrimmage against all those teams for the most part. I think it's a little bit different against this Bears defensive front. I do like the Colts offensive line quite a bit, but I think there's going to be some challenges there for sure. So I do think that the Bears give Rivers a little bit more pressure. We know what Rivers does under pressure. We've seen it a lot throughout his career. So I kind of like that from the Bears side of things. But I just don't like the Bears offense. And even upgrading them with Nick Foles, I mean, who was Nick Foles' OC when he was in Philadelphia? It'd be Frank Reich as well when they won the Super Bowl as well. You talk about a guy that knows what he's going up against this week as well. I just see more signs that point to a Colts close win. Like, I think it's a pretty fair price for the most part. I think the most likely outcome is the Colts win by 3 here. But these are two teams that I was kind of looking to fade potentially. And then I looked at the schedule and was waiting for numbers. I'm like, they play each other. Like, no strong opinion, but I'm more likely to play the Colts here.
They could have potentially played an under there, but that number is pretty low, 45. Adam Chernoff, what are you thinking with this one? Nick Foles, is he an elevation at quarterback over Trubisky? But nearly everyone is really right now.
So in my life, I've made 2 resumes. And I remember my first one when I was like 18 or 19. And you have to write all the skills and all that nonsense at the top. And so the first one I wrote was stubborn. And I sent it to my mom to edit. She was a teacher. And she's like, you can't put that on the resume. Like, that's not a good thing to put. And I was like, well, sure it is, because I'm confident in the opinions and I hang on to it to dear life. And she goes, no, like, you take that off. So I took it off the resume. And so I'm very stubborn with opinions that I tend to hang on to. But I've got better in betting with it as time has gone on. So with the Colts, I've been extremely high on them in the preseason coming into the year. Was very high on them in week 1, a game that Rob said they were a 3-0 team. I'm still convinced that they won that game against the Jags, despite what the scoreboard says. 3-0 team, but doing work this week, start to sort of see some signs of concern. So as Rob mentioned, they played the Jags, the Vikings, and the Jets. I don't think we can look at the Vikings in the same way, especially with that defense that they're putting on the field, if you can even call it a defense. But the 3 teams that the Colts have faced, 32nd, 30th, and 24 against the pass. That's by far and away the easiest schedule that any team has faced of opposing secondaries through 3 weeks of the season. The Colts are 9th in passing. That sounds good, but when you compare it against the schedule, that's very, very concerning. And so while it's looking decent on the field, you consider the opponent, and that starts to be a huge potential issue. They've been great in pass protection, but the offensive line that's deemed one of the better units in the league against these 3 defensive line, they're just 18th in adjusted line yards, 27th in short yardage blocking situations. And we didn't get to see the injuries that the Colts suffered in week 2 show themselves in week 3 because they played the Jets. But losing Paris Campbell and losing Malik Hooker are 2 enormous losses to these teams. Campbell and Rivers were getting along very, very well. That's an enormous loss. Malik Hooker, best player in that secondary by far. So that's all of a sudden a huge concern. Michael Pittman banged up as well coming into this game. So there's another receiver to go along with the tight end issues they've had this entire season. And then I look at the play calling. How predictive has this been? They're the 3rd lowest pass rate on early downs. And so they're still trying to make things work despite Marlon Mack being lost for the season in week 1. They're still trying to find Jonathan Taylor behind this offensive line. But against these 3-week defenses, it's just not clicking. And so as bullish as I was on the Colts coming into the season, it's kind of letting go about how strong I feel about the team. In this matchup, like the Bears on the other side against this Colts defense, which sits in cover 2, now they're without Hooker. I think there's potential deep. Rock Ya-Sin is also banged up, so we'll see what happens with that as well. So there's potential against this secondary where maybe Chicago can find success moving the football. But the Bears in the first 3 weeks, like obviously some big comebacks that have worked in their favor, a lot of luck working in their favor as well. But when you look at the EPA, you look at the success rate, they're about average or above average in all those categories, passing and running the football. So I think that this Bears offense can move the ball. And if the Colts can't find a way to continue drives, they're dead last in the league for offensive third down conversion rate through 3 weeks. Again, against these defenses, the Bears have any success on defense, 3 points looks pretty big in favor of the Bears. So interesting spot to say the least.
Drew Dinsick, don't look now, but the Bears are 1 win away from a 4-0 start. Would you have believed it? What are you thinking there? Does it end on Sunday night?
I think yes, and I concede all. The points you guys are making are strong.
Yep.
Neither of these teams has played anyone, and so the fact that they have succeeded in large part to this point in the season doesn't really tell us much, other than they played some poor teams. And I guess the one thing that has surprised me, and this is something you're always stuck when you're looking at kind of the number side of handicapping. What do you do with a number like the Colts defense is conceding negative 0.2 yards, expected points per play per drop back, right? Like that's by far and away the best in the league. And I came into the season and I kind of looked across the roster and I was like, I don't know about the secondary. Like they did some fine things addressing some holes. Like DeForest Buckner is a nice player, but like these cornerbacks, these safeties, And yet here we are through 3 weeks and they are performing clearly the best against the passing of any team in the league, which is very, very surprising. And you can look at that 2 ways and say, well, Kirk Cousins had his worst ever game as a pro against them. And they played Sam Darnold. So of course their numbers look good. Right. But at the same time, has Xavier Rhodes figured something out? Because he was a good player a couple years ago, and he was the defensive player of the week last week.
I mean, he's the number 1 ranked cornerback by PFF right now.
Yes. Is that real?
Strange year, guys. Pretty strange year.
It's the scheme.
Right. But it's the scheme, it's the coaching, which goes back to like why the Colts are like a team I'm fine backing, because they have one of the better coaches in the league. This is a coaching poor league overall. Frank Reich is good. Like he's coached these guys up. And to the degree that Malik Hooker matters, we'll find out in this game. To the degree that, I personally think Rock Ya-Sin stinks. So I'm fine if he's not on the field. But in general, the passing defense is pretty solid here. And to the overall question of Foles, Trubisky, Matt Nagy saw these guys through 4 weeks of preseason and picked Trubisky, right? Like if Foles is an upgrade, then Matt Nagy, we got some serious questions, buddy. Why in the world did you try to Mitch Trubisky out there weeks 1 and 2? I've never really been a Foles guy. I very memorably lost a lot of money fading the Philadelphia Eagles through their Super Bowl run. I think I bet against them in all 3 of their playoff wins and even took halftime positions against them. I was literally like, this guy is a backup. He's a replacement level player. He will start sucking any minute now. It just never manifested.
The scheme.
Right. So maybe in the same way that the Bears specifically have a problem with Rob, maybe Nick Foles specifically has a problem with me, and he's going to make me eat these words. But realistically, this is going to be an ugly game. I don't think you're going to see especially efficient offenses. I agree that, the pass rush for the Bears, going up against the strength of the Colts offensive line is going to be a great matchup. And whoever wins that is probably going to determine how many points the Colts score. But if the Colts offensive line wins that, they're going to be up a decent amount in this game. And if that is the case, the Bears have made 2 unbelievable comebacks against teams that can't run the ball worth a damn. And the Lions, no hope running the ball to put that game away. The Falcons, no hope running the ball to put that game away. The Colts absolutely have the right recipe to matriculate the ball down the field, nice long drives in the 3rd and 4th quarter, really put these guys under pressure. And if they're scoring, if they have any red zone efficiency, if they're winning the battles in the trenches, then I think the Colts cover this comfortably.
Made an exceptionally good case, man. Adam, go.
No, but just in regards to the Foles Trubisky thing, here's how I look at it. So last year, the rumor was that Nagy disliked Trubisky so much that he was intentionally making the playbook more difficult for him to manage. So that was the rumor that was lingering. But if you for me, I look at the organization. So they're the laughing stock of probably the next decade because of how they handled the draft, taking Trubisky over Watson and Mahomes. We know that that's the case. So they go out and they spend a ludicrous amount of money to get Nick Foles and bring him onto this roster. If they would have started Foles week 1 and he struggled, and that continued up to this point, and they had to go back to Trubisky, those two guys would be roasted the rest of their career. So I think that they knew that Foles was better than Trubisky coming into the season, but they had to start Trubisky first. So he looked at some point like he did last week. And then they said, okay, we can make the switch. And now they're getting what they wanted. I don't buy those rumors that Trubisky was actually better than Foles in camp. I'm not saying Foles is great. I agree with you guys that he's not great. There's no question about that. But I think that this was them sort of setting Trubisky up and protecting themselves after such a wasted draft and this whole situation for overpaying. I think that this sort of is what they've wanted all along.
If that is true, it's exceptionally convoluted strategy.
Of course it is, but it's an exceptionally ridiculous general manager and coaching staff to put themselves in a terrible situation.
It's valid, though. Politics play a part in sport.
Absolutely.
I mean, and honestly, I could foresee a situation this game. I don't like Foles. I don't like Trubisky at all, but I could foresee a situation in this game where the Colts build up an early lead and then the Bears actually turn back to Trubisky in the fourth quarter or something, and he leads them to victory because they're so fundamentally different as quarterbacks as well. And you see this in the NFL a lot with quarterbacks coming in mid-game, where it's happened a lot so far this year, where they look good. Like Jeff Driscoll looked good coming in against Pittsburgh in the first game. And it's because you game plan for one quarterback the entire week, and you get something completely different. And I almost think the Bears should kind of use that to their advantage. Like, they don't have any good quarterbacks. They both stink.
Closer.
College offenses do that. The Bears should do that, right? Make a game plan for both of these guys. And I wouldn't be surprised if we actually got to that point at some point.
I mean, Ryan Pace has done a very poor job general managing this team. Period. He is on his last.
Wait a second. Are you saying are you saying not having 8 tight ends on your roster is a good move? I don't know, man. No, I don't know. No. I think you're a bit out there. Okay,
everybody's playing for their job in the NFL. It's a very short term, very win now focus, which distorts a lot of this stuff. So all of this speculation is probably fair. But Rob's point is also good, to the degree you can kind of create some mystery, some mismatch. And, and again, Ryan Pace, or Matt Nagy, why come out so early in the week and commit to Foles?
Exactly.
What are you doing? Keep it a secret. Surprise people. Use a little sleight of hand here, buddy. What are you doing? So
and really mess with their heads and saying we're going to do dual quarterback every second series, something like that. And you don't have to do it. You're not locked in and doing it, but I don't know.
There's a famous saying, though, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you actually have no quarterbacks.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. Okay. Best of a bad bunch there. All right, guys. This won't take long. Bet recap. I think, look, the great thing about the podcast, the great thing about differing opinions is that, I believe, even just as a kind of a casual bettor, you kind of already have your mind made up, but it's good to hear, the voice of the 3 of you guys, especially about different points. And you can kind of make your own opinion off that. You can take Drew's opinion, maybe on the last game, you take Adam's. It's kind of whoever you want to back on that. So I think, look, guys, we did 4 games there. The only game I saw a bit of consensus there was the Bills and Raiders. And, minus 2.5 in the Bills, and there's 1.91 available at Matchbook right now. If you want to go for -3, it's a 1.93. So let's be honest, it's a bit kind of a no-brainer there at 1.91. So let's take that. And I think the over 52, I can't see how there won't be points in that game too. So look, again, we gave plenty of opinions on that. But for those main 4 games, there are bets locked in. And like we said, tough week. Anything else? It's just probably a stupid question, but look, we've 14 games at the moment on the board. We covered 4. But of the others, Drew, anything else jumping out at you from elsewhere?
Yeah, so my ratings on the Giants and the Washington Redskins are so low offensively, and I upweight offense relative to defense in my modeling. So I don't have any problem laying the points with Baltimore and the Rams here. They're just such a class above. This is one of those where the sharps won't lay 13, whatever. Like these, there's no
these
line.
Teaser central. These are teaser central. These games, they're going to be Rob.
You can please these for all I care.
They're actually not bad teaser plays. I mean, typically those are the ones you want teaser plays. You want to throw those in, but I don't agree on the Rams. I mean, I think that number's fine, but Baltimore to me is short, and I think a lot of people are going to look at that game, and especially like the contrarian bettors, and they're going to see like 80% of people are betting Baltimore. Like Washington has to be the right side.
No, they're not.
This is worrisome for me because Ron Rivera he's made some comments about Dwayne Haskins this week. I hope he's not on a short leash where this is one of those where you get like the Alex Smith experience instead, which is going to be an upgrade because Haskins is horrible quarterback. But if Haskins plays this whole game, Baltimore's winning by like 4 touchdowns. I'll lay the 13 with the Ravens.
Yeah. They might score 7 touchdowns in their first 7 drives. I wouldn't be surprised.
Like John Bostic at linebacker in 2020, they're going to struggle badly to cover this Ravens attack. Like you could put me, Drew, and Chernoff at linebacker for Washington this week, and I think we have a better chance of continuing Jackson.
Yeah. I'm not pleasing it.
I'd probably rotate you guys in the 3 maybe put a middle linebacker every play. So guys, come on. Look, we haven't got much on this week. 1.94 at Matchbook at the moment. Baltimore Ravens -13. Lay 'em. Adam, you have to agree with us there, yeah?
Yeah, no disagreement there at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And anything else, guys, before we move on to top dogs?
I got one under on the card, and it's
2020.
Under, It's the NFL. I played an under. But going back to the well with the Tampa Bay defense here, going up against Herbert on the road, this is not a great matchup for the Chargers. And I got in at 45. It's down to 43.5. That was largely because of the Chris Godwin news. And Tampa Bay in general, not impressed really with what Tom Brady is doing down there. I know they're scoring points. You can look at the wins. You can look at the margin of victory and say, oh, these guys are doing great. But there's still a lot of things they need to figure out to be a coherent offense. And the Chargers have a decent defense. This will be a pretty step up in level of competition for the Buccaneers in terms of defenses they're facing. Chargers will be without Chris Harris, but the secondary players that come up behind him are all very, very good. And I think this is going to be tough for either team to really manifest much offense. So this turns into kind of an ugly field goal type of battle.
I may have missed it at the top, Drew, but what number did you get on that?
I took 45. It's at 43.5 right now. I think that's still value. I would make this 41.
Okay, cool. 43.5 currently available at Matchbook at 1.96 on the under. Right, gentlemen, very quickly, top dogs pretty unlucky last week. Adam, you nailed Detroit. I nailed Kansas City. Mahomes is an underdog like Rob said, for the last time for the next 10 years.
I was within 30 points.
Who did you have again?
I had the Giants, and that was probably the worst play of this. Will probably go down as my worst play of the season. I can't believe I honestly.
Niners only missed
extra week, full concentrated week of prep. That was just an absolute butt kicking.
Niners, 9 injuries as well. So I could see the logic, but that's the joys of it. Okay, give us one dog this week from each of you guys. We won't spend long on this, guys, but one money line dog that could do the business. Adam Chernoff, I'll start with you first there, man.
I gotta go Bears in this case.
Okay. The logic fits. Okay. Rob Pizzola.
I'm going to take the Panthers. I think the general public is largely overrating the Cardinals' offense right now. Who is, DVOA, EPA per play, not as good as people think they are.
Okay, some good money around for the Panthers early this week at Matchbook as another place. Drew, what's your top dog of the week?
I'll go to war with the Cleveland Browns. I think that's a coin flip game. So give me 2.9 all day, all night.
All right, and that treble at the time of recording at Matchbook pays 17.0, which is 16-1 in fractional terms. Not so bad. We're going to click one of these guys, and that'll pay for the rest of the year, hopefully.
We should have gotten week 3, man.
Yeah,
wow,
exactly.
What about that week 2 one where
that was pretty close, yeah.
The Falcons were the lead, and
that was the one. Yeah, we should have got week 2. That one was right there for the taking.
A couple of 4th and goals on the 1 yard line were getting stopped. All right, guys, best part of the week for me always. best bets of the week for week 4. All right, Drew Dinsick, kick us off. Where are you going?
I'm going to stick with my Colts. I really think that I have the right read here. And, the fact that you got, the better coach, the better quarterback, when you got the advantage in the trenches, put away a lead, Bears are frauds, Colts -2.5.
All right, you said the Lions are frauds a couple of weeks against the Packers, and you're right there. Rob Pizzola, best bet of week 4.
I'm going to lay the points Sunday Night Football with the 49ers.
Ooh, nice.
I think the Eagles are miserable, like a miserable football team. And people are still expecting them to just revert into what they were. But they're down with 3 top receiving options this week. Offensive line is a mess. Defense is aging. Kyle Shanahan, like if I could give a coach of the year right now, I know they lost in week 1. I'd still give it to him because they've done without a lot of playmakers, they're getting players back this week as well. I think this is going to be a blowout. So I'll lay a touchdown with the 49ers, no problem. I make this number much higher than that.
All right, San Fran -7 and 1.97 at Matchbook at the moment. Adam Chernoff, best bet of the week.
Just quick to put you on the spot, that Houston, Minnesota total, is it still 54.5 at Matchbook?
Yeah, well, it's on the board, but it's kind of not on the board, if that makes sense. So 50. So just give me 2 seconds. So yeah,
that's 54. That's the total I really like. But since people listening are not likely to be able to bet it or see it, I'm gonna have to. I'll defer, and we'll have, I think, opposition for the best bets of the week for the first time this season, and I'll go with the Bears on the money line.
Ooh, man,
Bears money line. Bears money line. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Once again, so you're not. Yeah. Well, look, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to take the 2.5. You're going to back them in the money line. All right.
No, if there was that 3 is gone, so it's about 2.3. So.
Congratulations to the Colts for your 2-point win.
If this were professional wrestling, it would be like a loser leaves the podcast.
There was a deep dive where Andy was so sure the dog was going to win, and I was so sure that 2.5 was the right side. It was Niners-Rams on Thursday Night Football a couple years ago. McVay and Shanahan in the first ever matchup against each other, and the favorite won by 2.
I think that was one of the best games I ever watched in my life. High-scoring game, right? I
think the final score was 40-38, something like that. 41-39. It was a scoregami for sure, and it was a 2-point final margin of victory. We both lost.
It's only week 4 of the NFL season, but if we manage to middle ourselves on our best bets, and maybe Rob Pizzola's best bet might come up then. I don't know, guys. It's a long way back for the season ahead if we start middling ourselves early doors. All right, guys, we are out of time. Thank you for joining me again today. Rob, great to have you on board for the season ahead. Really excited. Thank you for watching today, or thank you for listening if you're on the podcast. Got a lot of good stuff. All of a sudden, for a podcast, we had no bets. We have some bets and a bit of controversy in between. We'll talk to you next week. Best of luck with your week 4 bets, and stay safe.